In the blink of an eye, it all began. A madman rose. The world slept. Then the skies turned black. What followed was the deadliest war in the history of mankind. A global catastrophe where entire cities were reduced to ashes, nations and empires fell, and over 70 million people lost their lives. A tragedy so immense it seems almost unbelievable, yet it happened twice. This is the story of the Second World War, a true horror show that some still deny to this day. Are you ready? Let's dive into the past together. We are just a few subscribers short of hitting that 1 million subscriber milestone. So if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and join the family. It is November 9th, 1938, one of those crisp autumn evenings when everyone has a drink in their hand and they're heading home after a long day. The radio is playing swing jazz, and across Germany, people are celebrating a football victory. But then the news breaks. Munich has fallen silent. The streets are empty. People are barricading their homes. There is talk of war. And soon the truth is revealed. Germany has invaded Austria, a neighboring nation. From the perspective of the rest of Europe, this comes out of nowhere. Even within Germany, many have been surprised by the move. They thought Hitler would never dare. But he did it anyway. It may sound dramatic, but even then, few realized how dramatic things would become just a year later. You see, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and it started there in 1919. That year, World War I had ended. The once great German Empire had collapsed, and Germany found itself humiliated, broke, and angry. As the losing side, Germany had to take the blame for starting the war and pay heavy reparations. This created huge inflation. The mark plummeted in value and unemployment skyrocketed. As people suffered, they began looking for someone to blame. And then he appeared on the scene, a little man with a big mustache who promised to turn everything around. His name was Adolf Hitler, and he attracted followers because of his simple and hateful message. He claimed that the only reason Germany had lost the war was because of internal enemies: communists, socialists, Jews. Soon he went from a nobody to the leader of Germany. Hitler spoke with charismatic confidence and gathered huge crowds. But behind the scenes, he was insecure and often contradicted himself. Some days he claimed to be pro-war. Other days he claimed to be a pacifist. What we do know is that while in power, he began building up the German military in violation of international agreements. In 1936, he remilitarized the Rhineland. Then in 1938, he took control of Austria. While these moves were condemned by other European powers, no one did anything about it. That brings us to November 1938, when Germany annexed the Sudetenland region of Czechoslovakia. Once again, the rest of Europe said nothing. Many believed that Hitler had finally taken things too far with his invasion of Austria. But it happened anyway, and that made it clear that the rest of Europe needed to make a decision. Would they stop Hitler's aggression, or would they let him continue? As we know, appeasement failed. And on September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland, and World War II began. For most Europeans, it was hard to imagine that things could get worse than World War I. That conflict had resulted in the deaths of over 15 million people, but that was nothing compared to what was coming. Within 2 weeks, Germany had swept through Poland and millions of people were already dead. But this was just the beginning. In 1940, Germany unleashed a new style of warfare called Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. The Germans bombed and attacked so quickly that Poland couldn't keep up. Denmark and Norway fell in a matter of days. Then it was Belgium and the Netherlands. Finally, it was France. At this point, the French had the largest army in Europe with nearly 1 million men, but the Blitzkrieg proved unstoppable. Within 6 weeks, France was defeated and over 40,000 French soldiers had died. Paris fell on June 14, 1940, and 2 days later, France surrendered. On July, Hitler stood beneath the Eiffel Tower and proudly raised the swastika flag. Only Britain stood between Germany and total victory in Europe. For a time, it looked like Britain might be next. The German Luftwaffe bombed London night after night. Winston Churchill rallied the British people. "We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." And they didn't. In the end, the British held firm. Hitler failed to break them, and soon it became clear that Britain was not alone. Secretly, the battle had already begun. On June 22, 1941, German troops crossed into the USSR. For their part, the Soviets were totally caught off guard. Although secretly, Stalin had been preparing for war since 1938. It's unclear whether he hoped that the Germans would win in Western Europe and occupy France. But whatever his plans were, they failed. Germany kept pushing deeper and deeper into Soviet territory. By October, Moscow was under attack, and by December, the Germans were just 20 miles from the Kremlin. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, trouble was brewing in Asia. The Japanese had been expanding their empire for decades. They saw themselves as the superior race and wanted to rule over all of Asia. When Japan attacked China in 1937, the League of Nations did nothing. It was an important lesson for Japan. If the Western powers did not want to intervene in Asia, then they would simply have to do it themselves. The opportunity came in 1941 when Japan decided to strike at the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. On December 7, 1941, Japanese fighter planes descended upon Pearl Harbor. The attack lasted just 2 hours, and over 2,400 Americans were dead. Congress declared war on Japan. The United States had entered World War II, and suddenly the conflict was global. The fighting continued across Europe, North Africa, the Pacific Islands, the Atlantic Ocean, and even the skies above. German U-boats sank countless Allied cargo ships. As U-boat warfare increased, so did tensions. On May 1941, the SS Reuben James was sunk by a German submarine, and 11 Americans died. Washington demanded reprisals, and as we mentioned earlier, things got very personal. Soon it was clear that victory would require massive armies and massive casualties. But which side would suffer more? At first, it looked like the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan. Between 1941 and 1943, the Axis seemed invincible. They controlled most of Europe and large parts of the Mediterranean. Japan conquered much of Southeast Asia. The United States was having a tough time in the Pacific. But then things began to turn. In early 1942, Japanese forces pushed deep into Russia. But later that year, they were beaten back. And in 1943, Japan suffered its most devastating defeat at the Battle of Midway. The U.S. sank 4 Japanese aircraft carriers, and over 3,000 Japanese pilots and sailors were dead. Across Europe, it was a similar story. The Germans suffered crushing defeats at Stalingrad and in North Africa against the Desert Fox, General Rommel. With the tide of war turning, all that was left was for the Allies to cross the finish line. And that brings us to June 6, 1944, D-Day, the largest seaborne invasion in history. Thousands of Allied ships landed in France and battled their way onto the beaches of Normandy. The fighting was fierce, but by the end of the day, the Allies had won. Hitler was now fighting a war on 2 fronts. From the west, Soviet troops pushed from the east. And as the Allies advanced across France, Hitler's inner circle realized that Germany had lost. Hitler refused to believe it and stayed in his bunker until the bitter end. On April 30th, 1945, with the Red Army just blocks away, Hitler killed himself along with his wife and lover. 6 days later, Germany surrendered. But sadly, the war wasn't over yet. Japan still hadn't surrendered, and neither had its allies. Italy and Germany had surrendered in 1945, but Japan kept fighting. So in August, the U.S. decided to deploy a new and terrifying weapon. On August 6, 1945, an American B-29 bomber dropped an atomic bomb over Hiroshima. 3 days later, another bomb was dropped over Nagasaki. Over 200,000 people were killed. Finally, on September 2nd, 1945, Japan surrendered. World War II was over. Over 70 million people were dead. Whole cities lay in ruins, and the worst of humanity had been revealed during the war. The world would never be the same again. But out of the ashes, something new was born: the United Nations. Despite the horrible mistakes of the past, the world hoped to create a better future. But the dream of lasting peace would have to wait for another day. As the old world order collapsed, a new one emerged: the United States and the Soviet Union. The stage was set for the Cold War. Now it's time to hear from you. What was the most shocking part of World War II for you? Let me know in the comments below. And before you go, please remember to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps my channel grow and allows me to keep bringing you more amazing stories from history. Thank you for watching.